So just a brief outline of what we're going to talk about this morning in terms of teaching and learning, which is effectively the daily business of what we do here at GEMS Wellington. So I'm going to start by introducing myself and my colleague here, and then we're going to go through what teaching and learning is, how we sort of tackle that process here with our students, what that looks like in the classroom, and then really importantly, how that affects you and what you can do at home to support us, to help our students learn and make the best progress and attainment they can in their time with us at school. Okay, so as I mentioned, I am Sarah Warnken. I'm the Senior Vice Principal of the Academy. So my job function is actually the whole school. I work with the students right from FS all the way through up to 18. I work with the teachers and students, so I'm kind of involved with absolutely everybody. I'm not specifically attached to any year group or any part of the school. My job is really looking at teaching and learning across that whole journey so that the students really get that uniform approach, that we're not wasting time by changing and moving things around in between year group phases. And yeah, that's basically what I do here at the school. And I'll just introduce my colleague Steve.
Good morning, everybody. It's very nice to see you all. My name's Stephen Kay. I'm the primary assistant principal, and I'm also in charge of teaching and learning from a primary aspect. Another one of my roles is the Wellington Director for STEAM. Okay, now STEAM is abbreviation of Science, Technology, Engineering, Art and Maths. I'm going to talk a little bit later about why that's really important. Also, just a quick heads up, I've been teaching now for 15 years in the UK and Dubai as well. And I've seen a great deal of change in the education system and the way that we teach. And we're going to talk about how that impacts on what we do in school. Okay, so like I said, I started teaching many years ago, it seems, and the first class that I taught in actually had the chalkboard, the blackboard with the chalk. Our library was the local community library. We used to take the children down there on a Monday to the library to visit, and anything that the children wanted to learn, if we didn't have a book, then you were just hoping that I knew the knowledge for that. Whilst obviously the internet was around, it wasn't as accessible. We still had one computer that was wheeled around to the classes. So today, when we talk about teaching, that evolution of teaching has changed so much. So the way that we structure our lessons now is changed and based on the fact that we have this incredible access to knowledge via the internet. It's changed that our digital ability to link with what the children do at home and what the children know is there. But also, I'm sure you've heard it a few times, this science of learning. So the science of actually, how do we teach? So the way that we structure our lessons are designed so that, number one, our children are paying attention, they're attentive, they're focused on what we want to teach, and the way that the teachers deliver is done specifically so that every little bit of information is key to that child understanding a really core principle so that we can build on that. Now, like I said, one of my roles is in STEAM, Science, Technology, Engineering, Art and Maths. Now, we obviously had science when I was at school. We used to call it DT, and we had maths. But looking at that second bullet point, how do we get across this really packed curriculum to our children? Well, one of the things that science of learning tells us is that we have to make links. It's no good a child being in year 3 and then going into year 4 and not referring to what they've done in year 3. They won't remember anything they've done. It's also not about anymore just these factual knowledge. There is no reason for me just to teach children the wives of Henry VIII. They can simply get Google and they can find that out within 2 seconds. But if we want to start asking the children questions about why did this happen? What is the most important? How does that reflect on what we do today? And how might that affect you? Then you can't find that on Google. So the way that we design our curriculum is those sorts of questions are being repeated over a series of terms and a series of lessons so that the children start to reflect on those more and more, and eventually it sticks. I always say this, I did very well in my A-levels, my A-level history. I couldn't tell you the topics that I did in my A-level history when I was 16. I can't remember. I can barely remember the teacher's name. So why is that? Okay, and we're going to talk about that again in a little bit later. But again, the tasks that we get our children to do in these lessons are no longer simply form filling. I always tell the children, there is no career or job you will have where you will sit in an office and someone will give you 20 questions that are all the same and then you answer them. You're going to have to use different skills in order to answer those questions. You're going to need not only, I'm afraid, there isn't a job where it's just maths and it's just science. You need to be pulling all of these in, and you need to be using skills that are going to help you create and develop. Those are the sorts of tasks now that we've moved on to. So this idea of just worksheets for the children with 20 questions, we're moving further and further away from as we try to get them to solve real life problems using a variety of skills.
So to build on, sorry, I have to stand here, the Zoom people don't hear me. So to build on that, effectively, my job is teaching and learning. So we wanted to break it down into two parts for you. So the teaching, when I'm going into a classroom, teaching is what's the teacher done to get this lesson together? What's going on? What's the knowledge that needs to be taught? As Steve just said, what sort of information are they going to need to take forward in order to be assessed in? How they put that together? What they're doing with the time in the lesson? But the really interesting and the most exciting part of my job is the learning. So the first part that we have to look at as a school is what are the teachers doing, and the learning is what are the students doing. And generally, that's the best indicator of the type of lesson. It's not watching the teacher. It's not looking at what's on the PowerPoint. It's actually going in, looking at the children, talking to the children and seeing what are they getting out of this. And that's very much how we focus our lesson observations and our drop-ins here. So the learning part is the process of the acquiring of the new skills and the new knowledge. So if I go in and I speak to a student, or I watch the children from the back of the classroom, or I sit at a table with our children, I'm looking, what's the teacher planned to allow that process to happen? And are there steps in that process perhaps missing? If some of the children aren't understanding, is there things that aren't in the lesson the teacher should be doing or could add in to make that process quicker or more seamless for the children? Learning is practicing. So it's looking at in our classrooms, in our lessons, in our schemes of learning across the term or across the week even. Are teachers building in opportunities for children to practice what they're being taught? Because they don't just read it, do it, done, move on. Like everything, you're all parents. You've watched your children grow up, and you know that it takes them quite a while to learn to walk, to learn to talk, to learn to crawl. Those are skills that are practiced over and over and over again. And they have to make lots of mistakes to master them. And we as teachers and educators have to also prepare our students in the classroom to do that. So set up tasks where they're allowed to make mistakes, address those misconceptions openly and freely with them so that they know that this is a safe space to get it wrong, but in order to learn and get it right. And then finally, learning is about the experience. So talking to the children about, what is it they're experiencing? Are they kind of free and creative? Are they able to take that learning and put it in another place and apply it somewhere else? Experience is also down to, are they happy with how they're learning? Are there other things they would like to try or like to do? And we're really, really proactive here at making sure our students have a voice and a say in how they want to learn too. And it's not just dictated by us or by a workbook or by a textbook. As Dee said, education has come on absolute leaps and bounds, particularly in the last sort of decade or so. And there's a real movement in the science of learning that we've adopted as our approach here to ensure that actually we are far more innovative and we're engaging with that so that our students do get the absolute best approach in the classroom. So our job is to go, right, what has been taught this lesson, and has that actually been learnt? And are we as practitioners, as teachers and educators teaching in the most effective way? And as a school, a lot of work was done last year on this idea to get us to a point where we have a model now. And that model really, we feel, has set us up to ensure that we are teaching effectively. And it is going to make sure the students have learned what they need to learn to do as well as they can. So we're going to share with you something that actually we've done with our teachers, and it is a bit sciencey, but if you go on, if you look online, if you look at anything to do with educational research, you will see this sort of these principles underline all effective educational practice. And Steve's just going to talk you through how we therefore underpin our teaching here.
Thank you. Yeah, you might have seen the diagram around quite a lot. And it is this really important process. So the very first thing you can see there is environment. Attention. Okay, I'm going to give you a little quick anecdote. About 2 years ago, I had a trainee teacher in my classroom, and it was the first time teaching the children, and they'd spent all night planning this lesson. They were really excited, and the children were sat down, and the teacher said, "Okay, I'm going to start. Oh, just before I start, I'm just going to hand out give you the handout." They went round, gave the children this piece of A4 that was two-sided, and a whiteboard and a whiteboard pen, and then proceeded to teach. And I was sat in the corner and I started laughing. And I thought, that's schoolboy error right there. So after 5 minutes, a lot of the children, what am I doing again, sir? Sorry, just I can't remember what I was doing. And he said, well, why? I don't understand what's happened. And I said, well, first of all, the children have a limited attention span. You're teaching them something which to you is really simple, but for them, they are a novice. You've given them a whiteboard and a pen that they now want to take the top off and they want to draw and doodle on that whiteboard. You've given them a sheet which they're automatically going to try and read. And then you're going to try and teach them as well and expect them to be able to manipulate that knowledge. So the first thing we learn from the science of learning is there's no learning going to take place unless that child's attention and that child's focus is ready. So in our classrooms, what we will do and what you will see is the teachers will prepare the children. Now, that's as simple as hands on laps, all chairs facing me, everything out of your hand, everything out of the side. The classroom itself, we won't have distracting images around the display. The display itself, when we're teaching, particularly our young ones, will be a very plain background so that those children's attention is fully focused on that, what's about to learn. Because our working memory, you can see in there, is very, very small. You know this, if someone tells you a phone number and says it really quickly, you've got no idea. It's gone very, very soon. You can only hold a certain small amount. And even if you're very good at something, we've all experienced this. I need to park my car in Dubai Mall. What's the first thing you do? You turn the volume down on the radio for some reason. Now, that's not linked, but my attention needs to be fully focused now on parking. So that radio is actually an extra attention. Now, you put that in a child in the classroom, you've got the children on the next table talking, you've got a piece of paper in front of me. No wonder why the children go home and say, can't remember what I did, I need to do it again. So the environment, the intention, we focus our teachers to have that perfect. Then the information that I'm giving that child is in very small chunks, because my working memory can only handle a very small amount. I've now got a very small, clear piece of information in my head. In order to get that to stick in my long-term memory, I need to do something with it, okay? If you think about it, if I have a phone number and you give it and I never ring that phone number, I'm going to forget it. If I have to ring that phone number every day, I'm going to find ways to make sure I remember it. I'm going to put the 3 digits together in chunks. This is what we do. We give them some small information. It's in the working memory. There's no distractions. We then do something with it, and hopefully it stays in the long-term memory. Now then, I've taught them something. They've all got it that day. If I don't recall that knowledge, you can see the last line there on the right. It's going to be forgotten. So what I have to do, a couple of days later, a week later, a month later, I will ask those children questions again about that lesson. And then it will force them to bring that back into the working memory. I'll get them to do something different with that information. And now it's processing more and more. So eventually, after 3 or 4 goes at using that information in different ways, that information is now stuck in the long-term memory. And they can use that then to apply. Now I don't need to turn the volume down when I'm parking in the Dubai Mall. And not only that, I can park on any car park in Dubai. I don't need to be going to the same one, any spot, because now I can apply that knowledge. So this diagram is all about the process of making that knowledge and that information stick.
So the reason that my job is homeschool, is because science has taught us recently that this is the way that every single child learns. Now, when I first trained, I'm sure when Steve first trained, there's been so many different approaches to how you should teach, and things have gone in and out of fashion. However, this is science. This is to do with your brain. This isn't done by teachers. It's been sort of done by educational psychologists, and it's about the brain and how actually the brain functions. And you can take a child who is 3 or 2 in our nursery, and you can take a child who is 18 and sitting in our A-level exams, and the process that their brain goes through to learn is exactly the same. Now, you do have children that prefer to apply their learning in different ways. So there are some children who are better at picking things up if they have a physical manipulator, so if they have a model they can play with. Or you have some children who learn really well through listening to instructions. Other children will just switch off. And therefore, we do have to be aware of that in the classroom. But the actual process of getting that environment right, making sure that we introduce that knowledge in a certain way, and that we constantly revisit it to allow it to come into our long-term memory and allow it to stay there, that is the same for every single human being. So just as Steve said, if you keep going through that process, if you constantly revisit with a 3-year-old or you revisit with an 18-year-old, it doesn't change. And if you're a parent of an FS child, so you think about phonics when we're teaching children to read, children are learning those sounds. They're learning in an oral way, so they're saying them. They often have actions they perform with them, and then they might practice writing them. So they're constantly using that knowledge in different ways, and that's how they pick those sounds up, and then they blend them together, and that's eventually how they start to read. And it's no different when you get to a child who's much further up the school and learning things for their exam. The volume absolutely increases. They need to have far more knowledge in their long-term memory in terms of what they've got to show to pass that exam. But the process for them is the same. It's remembering that knowledge and going back into retrieving that from their long-term memory, bringing it back to the fore and using it, saying, how can I show that in my answer to get the best marks and to show that I've made progress, and that's definitely in there. So as parents, yes, this is what we need to make sure we're planning, but as parents, how does that affect you? Well, I'm pretty sure all of you have had that conversation with your kid when they get in the car at the end of it. If you haven't, you will do if they're a little one. How's your day? What did you learn today? Those conversations, what did you learn today? How did you learn that? What did you do in the classroom? Those conversations where you're getting them to reteach you what they've done. That's an example. That's a way that you as parents can help them to retrieve. Show me the letters that you learned today, or when you're reading with them. When you're reading at home, yes, reading is massively important, but all of those things that you're doing, you're helping us to retrieve things that we've taught them in that day. And if they're doing that at home and they're doing that at school, then their success is going to be far, far quicker and far more rapid. So what we did with the Science of Learning is we created as a school 9 different strategies or approaches. So when we go into lessons, we know scientifically that these things work. Now, these are for the teachers, and they really sort of help us to ensure that as in a lesson or across a scheme of learning, so perhaps a week or a term or longer term if it's a bigger unit, that we're looking for these sorts of things in our classrooms. So we're looking for retrieval opportunities to go back, find knowledge and remember. Yeah, not just teach it, move on, teach it, move on. If you do that, that's when you forget. Making sure that the students know where they're looking, what's the focus, is it really clear what they're learning today? Because sometimes if it's not, the students will leave and say, I don't really know what I was supposed to have learned today. And our expectations, not only just about our academic expectations, but the kind of qualities and characteristics that students should exhibit in our classrooms, being really clear with that. Making sure, as Steve said, that when we present new things, we don't throw the book at the children. It's not a barrage of information that overwhelms them, because if it is, again, that working memory is only a certain size, and if we put too much in it, it will just start falling out. So really making sure what's the most important thing they need to learn now and first in order to build on that. Linking their learning, making sure the learning is applicable perhaps across other subjects. So if they're doing something in maths, it might be something they can link to their science curriculum, but capitalising on opportunities in the classroom where we can say, okay, so we were doing this yesterday, this subject, how does that relate today? Providing models. So actually showing the children what we want. What does that success look like? That should be part of the classroom practice. It's all very well saying you need to do this to get an A, but actually what does that look like? Or to get a grade 9, or to pass that assessment? but they need to see, not only see what it looks like, but see how that's constructed. And that comes through the teaching. So there's a lot of work that we're doing with our teachers to ensure they know how to do that in the classroom and confidently demonstrate live with our children. This is how you do that process with the children, so they also can then emulate that, do that themselves. Just putting an example on the board, done and finished, is not showing them the process to how you got to that point. And if you don't break that down and do that with the children, then they don't know. They're certainly not going to be able to just copy it or emulate it or do it in their own work with their own knowledge if we have taught that process to them. Again, questioning, sort of daily bread and butter for us, but the kind of questions we ask. And again, I would urge you as parents, when you're talking to your children, the kind of questions you ask are the one are going to provoke conversation, but are also going to provoke their curiosity and allow them opportunity to really think about what they've learned. So, did you have a good day? Yes or no? Why did you have a good day? Tell me something that you did today that was interesting. Tell me something today that wasn't so interesting, or why did you find that hard? Or how do you think you could have made that better? Or what might you do next time differently? Those are the sorts of questions that are going to get your children to be thinking and improve that sort of brain elasticity to really adapt their brains. So yeah, questions in the classroom for us to ask questions like that too. But again, if you're doing that with us, it's sort of the double-edged attack there. They're definitely going to get it from both sides. Guiding their practice, so doing it with them, still talk about that in a moment, but actually not just saying, okay, I've taught this to you now, off you go, because again, they're not going to know how to do that unless we've walked them through that and practiced that with them and shown them exactly how to do that or how they might approach that. Then giving them a chance to do it independently. And then finally, giving them that feedback once they've had a go that will help move them forward. So not the kind of feedback that just says, really good, well done, here's a tick and a star, but actually, this is what you did well, and this is where you went on the right track, but actually this is what you missed out, or this is where in that process perhaps you've still missed a gap. So that's pretty much how we underpin our learning in terms of our lessons here. We also are a high performance learning school, and I'm sure you're aware of that as from just looking around and probably from other conversations this morning. And without sort of going into depth about what high performance learning is, it really is a strategy where we are constantly as teachers also looking for opportunities to build characteristics. Education now has got to be so much more than just a piece of paper and getting some grades. We are preparing children for jobs that don't yet exist. And certainly when I was at school, if someone had said to me, being a YouTuber or an influencer was a career prospect, I would have said, what is that? I wouldn't have known. So we don't actually know some of the jobs that our children are going to be doing. But what we do know is that if we give them more than a piece of paper, if we give them opportunities to develop characteristics in themselves as learners, they will go on and be successful. So it's far more than just remembering and passing tests. It's about creating children who have qualities where they're able to think and link and be creative and apply and analyze and evaluate all that information at the drop of a hat. Okay, so what does happen in the classroom?
Okay, so I'll do this quite briefly, and to be honest, it's pretty self-explanatory, really. But it's just been tightened up an awful lot. So the first thing we're going to do is the teachers are going to show the children the information that we want and what that looks like. Okay, so let's take the example, learning to drive. Okay, so we're sitting in the car. Rather than me suddenly have a go and make lots of mistakes, maybe crash, the teacher is going to show me how to operate the car. Okay, and they're going to do that in small steps. They don't do everything at once. So the first thing is check it's in gear. We're going to move forward before we even turn, before we do reverse, before we do anything else. So you're showing the children one small aspect of that learning objective that day. And then we're going to practice it. Okay. Now, again, it seems very straightforward, but the children are practicing small chunks. And what's really important is before we get onto the children doing it, the teachers are then able to say, are you practicing this in the right way? Have you made a misconception? Do I need to change what you're practicing? And do I need to reteach that? So showing and practicing, first of all, is about getting the very small key ingredient of that learning correct before and the children go ahead and do. So I've learned all the various aspects of driving, okay, and the teacher, well, I'm on an empty car park, first of all. The teacher has gone over 2 or 3 things that I struggled with. The teacher is now confident that I can do all those little aspects. It's now my time to drive, okay? So I'm going to drive around that car park and I'm going to do it. Again, the teacher might stop because they've spoken to me, they've asked me questions, they've watched, and they might say, I'm going to show you again something that we do. But now that I can competently drive around that empty car park with all the various skills, that doesn't help me. What I need now to do is apply that. So that is actually getting on the roads and putting all of those things together. Now, when we think about that in the classroom, we are teaching the children those really basic, important pieces of knowledge. We have checked through questioning, through observing, through working with the children, that everything that they're doing is correct. We've given them the opportunity now to show that they can do that, to build that, to get slightly more difficult. And then we design these wonderful tasks that allow the children to apply that knowledge and other knowledge that they've learned in a real meaningful way. And I think that last one in particular was the bit that was missing when I was at school. It was simply, I'm going to teach you how to add 2 things together. I'm going to give you 20 questions, and then I'm going to leave you to it. There was no checking which parts of it I got wrong, only that I did get it wrong all right. And there was then no ability for them to say, well, let's see what that looks like in the real life. So this is the format that you will see in lessons through the day and through the weeks as well.
So that's the structure of sort of how we want our teachers to deliver learning. There are other things that we all have a responsibility to build on and improve in our students as well. So within a lesson, we'll be capitalising on opportunities to build on vocabulary. That's for first language speakers, native speakers, second language speakers, limited ability speakers. Basically, the language of communication comes from students' ability to build on that vocabulary. And it really is important for our teachers to draw attention to moments where perhaps they're introducing new words and to talk about that. And again, as parents, I would really urge you to point out new language. You know, when you're out and about, there's new words. If your children are asking, what does that mean? Just having conversations and creating an inquisitive nature in words and what they mean really, really has a massive impact on students as they progress throughout school. You will all remember, I'm sure, from your own secondary and higher education, the amount of new vocabulary and subject-specific vocabulary you have to acquire to pass your terminal exams. It's huge. But that skill of learning vocabulary begins when they're tiny, tiny babies. Before we even get them in school, you know, you are their first teachers. You are the ones teaching them how to speak and to acquire language. And that doesn't stop when they get to school. It doesn't just become the teacher. It actually becomes a partnership between you and us. The more that you're talking to them about their language, you know, sometimes correcting them or steering them to more appropriate words that might be more in line with what they're trying to say and express themselves. Those are things that, yes, we will do, but also you as parents have a real power to do that too. Literacy obviously underpins everything, their ability to read and write and communicate and speak. So we will be looking at opportunities, even in a maths lesson. You know, it's all very well teaching a really complicated formula, but the number of children that I've seen in my professional career who get to 16 and can't read the question or can't decode the word or don't really know what the questions aren't asking them because their reading levels aren't great. So it's not just a problem in the English lessons or where they've got to do extended writing. Their literacy is so important for maths and for science and for those sort of more sciencey brained or right-brained subjects, because if they don't understand what's being asked, if they don't comprehend, which comes through literacy, they still can't actually demonstrate their knowledge. Numeracy, so again, opportunities to underpin numeracy. Again, as parents, there's loads of opportunities in the real world where you can support with this too. So when you're doing, you know, maths at home, and I don't think you're all sitting there with maths books at night time rather than watching something on Netflix. What I mean by that is, you know, when you're talking about your finances, or if you're out shopping with the children and you're looking at buy one, get one free offers, all of those practical examples up there, numeracy, you know, and it starts again really, really young. We're teaching fractions and we're teaching percentages in junior school. So when you're in the shops and you're working out how much something is, or if it's a third off, have that conversation. And if they don't know, absolutely fine, but they're used to those conversations and they're probably going to have to go digging somewhere in their working memory or their long-term memory to find, oh yeah, we did that at school. I think I can show you how to do that, Mum. Or yeah, I remember how to do that, Dad. Let me show you what I learned at school. Really great opportunities there for you to build on with us. Oracy, communication. So it doesn't matter how fantastic you are at English, whether it's your first language or not, or whether you're learning it with your children. All opportunities to speak it and to talk it are going to be beneficial for them. We also like to build in opportunities of choice. So as I said to you earlier, we do all learn in the same way, but we do have preferred learning styles. And, often some children will want to get up and be more active. Some children will like to sit down and perhaps would like to colour or draw something. And yes, we have different ways that we like to exhibit our learning, but it's really important, in essence, we give our students some choice and some agency over how they learn or how they apply that learning and show us what they've learned. We're also looking for opportunities to develop student enterprise. So as I said to you, it's about how is this relevant now? The number of teenagers you go, oh, why do I need this? Am I ever going to use this when I leave school? It's actually showing children, okay, this is why it's relevant to you, or this is how it's going to be interesting. So Ben, I was talking to him in one of our training sessions with our staff last week, and he said one of the units at primary school is about the Great Fire of London, and the children, it happened hundreds of years ago. Some have never been to London. Some aren't interested in that side of things, but that, it's something they need to cover. But the minute you make that learning applicable, and you might show them, a favela, or you might show them, a building, a modern day building, and think about, well, how when that building was being constructed, and they're building all over Dubai and the UAE, how when that building was being constructed, do you think they had to plan in case there was a fire? If there was a fire, how would we get out? How would we be safe in our buildings? So it's taking that learning, but linking it and showing them that actually it's relevant, it's still relevant. And again, making sure they know that that's actually applicable just beyond that classroom environment. Helping our students have an opinion. Again, something you can do at home with them, asking them why do they think what they think and how they got to that perspective. And challenging their opinions, but encouraging them to certainly have one. And we really want to make sure in our classroom that there's lots and lots of time and forum for discussion, so that they have a voice, that they can say what they think and that they're heard. And then finally, differentiation, because we understand that every child and every student will learn at different paces and in different ways. And certainly they might be fantastic at one subject, but not so great at another, or it might be an area they need to develop, in which case it's our job to ensure that our lessons are set up to allow children at whatever stage, whatever pace they can access and they can be part of that lesson. So we structure it in that way, as you can see, but then we have to look for those opportunities in the classroom as well and make sure that we're doing those regularly to really, really maximise the children's successes.
Okay, so when it comes to supporting children at home, I'm sure most of us, that's the key thing that we really want to get out of this. So in our early years, we use Class Seesaw, and this is a way that's obviously, particularly when we get down in FS, parents genuinely want to know exactly what it is that the children are doing. They like to see the children happy and engaged. So on that Class Seesaw, you will see pictures of the children engaged in their activities. They will be sharing that with the parents, little notes about what they've done through the day and what they will be doing as well. And then in class, they use something called Busy Things, and the parents as well have a login for this that they can get involved as well. When it comes to primary, we have, you can see there, the home learning Padlets that all the parents have access to. It lets you know exactly what the units are and the work that's being done. And then the primary teachers will send an email out at the end of every week, just detailing not only things that are important for parents to know, to do with uniforms or trips, etc., but also recapping the learning that's going on as well. We use something called Timetables Rockstars. It is a global app. I don't know if you're all aware of it. It is simply for children practicing automaticity with their multiplication tables. And it is extremely important and very, very valuable. And then in terms of home learning in primary, we use something called Sentry, which is an adaptive digital platform. It's fantastic. So you can imagine everybody, all the children are given some questions. The program itself will take their answers and it will adapt what they've done to the next step. So if the children are struggling with that, the program will give them work that's at their level. If they're exceeding, then again, the program will adapt that. And the teachers can give the children specific areas to work on related to, again, what they've got feedback in the classroom. and parents also have access to that as well. So parents building on the communication with the teachers and promoting that at home is massive for the progress of our children. Sarah's going to talk about secondary.
So to be clear, what I don't expect you to do is go home and download an iPad and make your child do all of these things. The idea is that you have an insight into what we use, and therefore, especially you can see the secondary side there, when they are on screens and they say they're doing their homework, they might actually be telling the truth, because generally a lot of the stuff is now online. They are encouraged to use applications and programs that are readily available at home just through a login, because actually we found that they're really, really powerful learning tools. So there are more, and obviously they're subject specific. So the secondary ones up there's just a sample up there, but you will hear, or very, very likely to see your child, if they're in secondary, using a multitude of different platforms. So for example, Showbee up there, that's used by the arts and photography and performing arts department. Seneca is a whole load of subjects, but science, the science team use that one. Kahoot, again, a lot of the humanities teams reported to me they're using those. They're interactive quiz type activities the children do in the classrooms. No Reading and JSTOR are English platforms. The two main ones that you'll find are Teams, so the students will have access to work Teams. So if they have work that's been set, that's where they will find it. And Go for Schools is our main communication platform with parents at secondary level. So if you want to know if there's been, in terms of their attendance, or you want to look at their assessment and their reporting, or you want if there's been an incident during the day and that's been logged, all of those things are through the Go for School, and that runs from year 7 all the way through to year 13, so age 11 up to 18. So yes, the children will be using lots of technology to assist with their learning, but obviously that supplements, as we've already explained to you, what's going on in terms of the teaching and how we design lessons to practice and apply that learning. Oh, sorry, very important one in the middle there. So PE, the sports team this year have changed their app for communicating with home. So if your child is involved with sports, anything to do with fixtures and training and events after school, will be going through that app in the middle, which is called Stack Team. So you will receive more information about that, I'm sure, in due course from that department. But it's good to know that if you have a sporty child, or one that's likely to be involved with lots of extracurricular, that will be the platform or the app that they use to communicate. So I mentioned the high performance learning program earlier on, and again, there's a whole strategy behind that we work on with our teachers to train them. But these are characteristics that we certainly look for in terms of beyond the academic, and they're the things that we reward our students for house points. You'll all be aware from buying uniform, they're allocated a colour, and what we're looking for is, rather than just sort of reward ad hoc, and one teacher really likes smart uniform and shiny shoes, another teacher really likes a child that reads at home, we've actually streamlined that. And what we do is we're looking for the same sorts of behaviours, again, to reward those positive learning behaviours, but behaviours that we know go on to build successful adults. And these are learning behaviours that actually we would encourage you as parents to look for at home and to reward at home. And they're grouped so that we can kind of look for them in a certain way in the classroom, but they're absolutely applicable at home. And they're things that you can foster in your children that we know allow children to make massive progress. So being collaborative, opportunities to work with other people, being concerned for society. We really, we want to maximise opportunities to show children that there is a big world out there we're preparing for, and that they have a role in that to play, and that they have a real part to make that a better world. To encourage them to be confident, to have some faith in themselves. That comes from, if you look at the hard working section, being resilient, getting children to pick themselves up when they've made a mistake. Mistakes are fantastic. Mistakes should be celebrated. But as a parent, yes, we all want our children to get 100%. But if they didn't get 100% and they tried, that's fantastic. And celebrating that with them, celebrating their effort, is what's going to build resilience in our children. They're wanting to continue, they're wanting to go on and do better and improve, so that the next time they get a better score. That's the quality that we need as adults as well. We don't just need it from our learners, we need to be adults that can do that too. And that starts training them now. So we obviously want them to practice, and again at home we'll be asking you to help us support with that by ensuring they do their homework so they can practice what they've been doing in class, and to persevere and keep going with something if they give up because they get frustrated with it. But absolutely, I said to you earlier on about the questions that you ask at home in that green box there, you know, having discussions that allow them to inquire. I have a 4-year-old, nearly 5, and goodness me, he asks some questions, and sometimes I just say, be quiet. But actually, it's really great that he's so interested in absolutely everything, and making opportunities for them to have those conversations and earmarking that time where they can do that, I know is going to benefit him in the long run. And as a parent, I would encourage you to as well, you know, get your children to inquire. Being open-minded, saying, you know, this is one way of seeing, but actually teaching them there are other ways of seeing things about the world, about a problem, or how you can solve it. So these are behaviours that we reward as a school, because we understand that, yes, they're going to make for great learners, but they're also going to make for great people. And then finally, just sort of listed there some sort of generic ones that I'm sure you've probably heard over and over again if you're a parent sitting in the auditorium, but supporting with reading. Again, if you have an older child, I know that they're not going to want to sit with you 10 minutes before bed and read their book to you if they're 15, probably unlikely. But you can talk to them about what they're reading. You can encourage a love of reading. You can take them to the library. You can say, you know, do you want to have order a book? You know, modelling reading. I know that it's something that perhaps we do online now, but often children who see their parents read are more inclined to read. And I know we have very busy days and very busy lives, but showing our children that we do that, they are more likely to emulate us. Literacy for the older children, if you are able to proofread their work and support with that, that's really, really helpful. Like if you've been degree educated or have the privilege to go to university, you'll know the massive importance when you're writing great long dissertations or assignments, how actually just having someone go over it and check your grammar, make sure it makes sense. You don't need to understand what it's about, but just go, is that a correct sentence? If you have that ability to do that with a child, absolutely do it. And it will often springboard some really great conversations. Conversation at home, if you can speak English with your children, if you can, again, just around the dinner table conversations where you're practicing English with them, really, really powerful. And an example of building cultural capital, you've got so much experience as parents, you know, if you've got grandparents at home or extended family, all of those things, children are hearing and learning things from those conversations, even if they're just sitting listening to it. But having those conversations at home and making children be part of that, rather than, you know, sometimes naturally they might take themselves off and go and sit in another room. But actually, you know, just sit in and talk to us. If you're watching something on TV, we're going to do that together and have a conversation about it. That cultural capital is massively linked to children's success educationally. And obviously communicating with us, letting us know what your child needs or how your child feels. We are here to make sure they do as well as they can, and they leave this school not only a fantastic learner, but a fantastic, well-rounded individual. And we want to make sure that we do everything we can in our power to help with that. And sometimes we won't know everything and we won't read their minds. You know, we'll be in contact with you, but actually our doors are open, our phone lines are open, our inboxes are ready for you. You are always welcome to come to us and tell us what it is you feel your child feels that they need, so that we can absolutely work together. We know that working with parents and that parent partnership is one of the most powerful things in terms of getting our children where they need to be. So we really do invite you to tell us, let us know how we're doing, let us know if there's things that need to be improved, let us know if the things that are working well or they're really enjoying, so we can do more of them. Okay, at the end now, so if there are any questions, if anyone has any questions, feel free to hands up or shout them out to us, and we'll finish there.
We'll also hang around at the front if anyone's got any questions specifically that you might want to ask. Yes. Yes, so from a very early age, the idea of print is very, very important. So that orientation around books, being able to hold it. There's something tangible sharing with particularly with a parent when you're sharing the book together.